A legendary weapon once burned on water itself. The secret formula for Greek fire was so fiercely protected that it vanished from history entirely. By the end of this video, you will know if modern science can finally rebuild this ancient superweapon. We will uncover how a single invention saved an empire from annihilation, and why its exact recipe remains one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles. What does it take for a technology to be lost forever? Constantinople was on the brink of collapse. In the 7th century, the mighty Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of Rome, was being strangled by a powerful new force. Arab armies, fueled by the explosive growth of Islam, had already seized vast territories, and now their massive fleet sailed straight for the capital's heart. The great walls that had repelled so many land armies were useless against this naval assault. The empire's survival hinged on a desperate need for a miracle. That miracle arrived in the form of a man named Kallinikos, an architect and engineer who fled the advancing forces from his home in Syrian Heliopolis. He brought with him to Constantinople not just his skills but a terrifying secret. He presented this discovery to Emperor Constantine IV, a weapon that defied all known rules of combat. This was not merely a new kind of flame. Greek fire could be pumped through tubes and launched from the prows of Byzantine warships, and most astonishingly, it roared and clung to the surface of the sea itself. Water could not quench it, it only fed the inferno. Imagine the sheer horror of an enemy sailor watching a river of fire flow across the waves toward their wooden ship, an unstoppable liquid nightmare. The tactical advantage was immense, but the true power of Greek fire was psychological. It created an aura of invincibility around the Byzantine navy, a belief that they commanded the very elements. This single invention did not just win a battle, it secured an empire for centuries, becoming the ultimate safeguard of a civilization fighting for its life. Aboard the Byzantine Dromon, the weapon was as much a piece of engineering as it was a force of terror. At the ship's prow stood a bronze tube, a specialized siphon that served as the heart of this system. This was not a simple pot of burning oil to be thrown by hand. It was a complex apparatus, a primitive flamethrower that gave the Byzantines a devastating reach. The key figure in this deadly operation was the siphonarios, a highly trained operator whose sole purpose was to unleash hellfire upon the enemy. Using a powerful pump, and possibly aided by a bellows to build pressure, he would force the mysterious liquid from its sealed reservoir through the bronze tube. At the very moment the stream shot from the nozzle, a small, constant source of ignition, perhaps a lit wick or a bed of coals, would set the liquid ablaze. The result was a roaring jet of fire that arced across the water. The true horror for an opposing sailor was not just the initial blast, but what happened next. This was not ordinary fire. It clung to everything it touched, spreading across wooden decks and most unnervingly across the surface of the sea itself. Waves did not extinguish it, they only carried the flaming slick further, turning the water into a sheet of flame that trapped ships in an inescapable inferno. The instinct to fight fire with water was a death sentence, as any attempt to douse the flames with seawater would only make them burn more fiercely. Panic was inevitable. Faced with a weapon that defied the natural elements, enemy crews had only one desperate option: to abandon their burning vessels and leap into a sea that might also be on fire. This terrifying substance, a liquid that defied water itself, had to be more than just ordinary fuel. At its heart was a secret recipe so valuable that knowing it was a matter of life and death for the empire. Historians and chemists have pieced together the likely ingredients from ancient descriptions, and the primary component was almost certainly a form of crude petroleum or naphtha. This is a naturally occurring liquid that seeps from the ground in certain regions, much like the oil springs known in the ancient world around the Black Sea and the Middle East. Naphtha is highly flammable, but on its own, it would not be enough to create the legendary fire that clung and burned on water. The true genius and the deepest secret lay in the potent additives mixed into this base. One of the most compelling candidates is quicklime. This is a substance made from heating limestone, and it has a bizarre and dangerous property. When quicklime comes into contact with water, it does not simply get wet. It undergoes a violent chemical reaction, generating intense heat, enough to ignite flammable materials nearby. Can you see how perfect this would be for a naval weapon? The moment the liquid stream hit the seawater, the quicklime within it would activate, helping to set the entire mixture ablaze. But the formula did not stop there. Sulfur was almost certainly another key ingredient, added to make the fire burn even hotter and to produce thick, choking, toxic fumes that would sicken enemy sailors. To make the burning liquid stick to wooden hulls and sails, preventing it from being easily shaken off, the Byzantine chemists likely added resin or pitch. These are thick, tar-like substances that are naturally sticky and highly combustible. Some researchers even speculate that saltpeter, which is a key component of later gunpowder, might have been included to make the fire more explosive and harder to extinguish. Yet knowing the ingredients is not the same as knowing the recipe. The exact proportions, the specific type of naphtha, the precise order of mixing, and the preparation method were the true state secrets. This knowledge was so guarded that it was reportedly confined to the emperor and one single family, the royal chemists. They would prepare different components in separate locations, ensuring no single person outside the imperial family possessed the complete formula. This was a secret worth more than any fleet, a technological advantage so powerful that its loss would mean the end of an era. That very defiance of water was the soul of its terror. A ship could be saved from ordinary flames, but Greek fire turned the sea itself into a fuel source. This was not magic, but a brutally clever application of chemistry. The key lay in the naphtha base, a light, oily liquid that is less dense than water. Just as a drop of cooking oil will float on the surface of a pot of water, the liquid fire would not sink. It spread out into a thin, volatile film, creating a vast, floating wick that continued to burn with a fierce intensity. But the true genius was in the additives. Remember the quicklime mixed into the brew. When this substance made contact with seawater, it did not simply dissolve. It underwent an exothermic reaction, a process that releases a tremendous amount of heat instantly. This surge of thermal energy was likely enough to reignite any of the primary fuel that had not yet caught fire, ensuring the mixture burst into flames the moment it hit the waves. Think of it like a chemical match striking itself on the water. The tactical implications were devastating. For an enemy sailor, every instinct was wrong. Throwing water onto the flames was the worst possible action. The water would only splash the burning, sticky liquid, scattering the fire across the deck and onto other sailors. Attempting to smother it with blankets or sand was nearly impossible once the substance had coated the curved, complex surfaces of a wooden ship. It clung to everything, burning and spreading relentlessly. This combination of physical and chemical properties created a weapon against which there was no reliable defense. It was not just a flamethrower, it was a system that weaponized the ocean, transforming the one element that gave a ship safety into its funeral pyre. The ultimate test of this terrifying new weapon came just years after its invention. In 674, a massive Arab fleet arrived at the walls of Constantinople, beginning a grueling siege that would last 4 years. The Arabs established a base across the Bosporus and blockaded the city, attempting to starve it into submission. But the Byzantines had a surprise waiting. When the Arab ships pressed their attacks, the Dromans surged forward. From their bronze siphons shot great jets of liquid fire that drenched the enemy vessels. The sea itself seemed to erupt in flames, trapping the wooden warships in an inescapable inferno. Historical accounts describe the horror and confusion as sailors leaped into a burning ocean. The Arabs, who had never faced anything like it, were devastated. This was not a single battle but a recurring nightmare. For years, whenever the Arab fleet regrouped and attacked, the Greek fire responded, burning their ships and shattering their morale. By 678, the siege was broken. The surviving Arab forces, demoralized and defeated, were forced into a full retreat. This victory was not just military, it was existential. It saved the heart of the Byzantine Empire and, many argue, prevented a fundamental reshaping of European history. Nearly half a century later, the empire faced the same mortal threat once more. In 717, another enormous Arab army and a fleet of hundreds of ships returned to finish the job. They were so confident of victory that they brought their families to settle in the capital after its fall. Once again, Constantinople was surrounded, and once again, Greek fire decided the fate of the world. The Byzantine Emperor Leo III used the weapon with brilliant tactical cunning. He did not wait for a full naval engagement. Instead, he sent out his fire-bearing dromons to attack isolated portions of the blockading fleet. In one decisive strike, Byzantine ships managed to set the entire Arab supply fleet ablaze, destroying the food and materials crucial for sustaining the massive army. The psychological blow was as devastating as the physical one. Trapped between the impregnable land walls of the city and a navy that commanded fire, the Arab forces were left starving and exposed to a brutal winter. Their invasion collapsed completely by 718. For a second time, Greek fire had single-handedly saved the empire from annihilation. Its reputation as the guardian of Constantinople only grew with time. The weapon was later deployed with equal success against other formidable enemies. When the Rus, the Viking ancestors of the Russians, sailed down the rivers to attack the city in the 9th and 10th centuries, they too were met with the same unquenchable flames. Their longships, so effective in northern waters, were horrifically vulnerable to a fire that clung and spread across the waves. The Byzantines also used it in their campaigns against the Bulgarians, proving its effectiveness was not limited to naval warfare. In every conflict, the result was the same: panic, rout, and a reinforced legend. For over 5 centuries, this single technological marvel was the ultimate safeguard of a civilization. It was more than a weapon, it was a symbol of imperial power and divine favor, a burning shield that convinced enemies the city was protected by forces beyond their understanding. How could any empire maintain such an overwhelming advantage for so long without its secret ever slipping out? The secret of Greek fire was protected with a ferocity that matched its destructive power. This was not merely a classified military project, it was a matter of state survival, guarded by a system of secrecy so absolute it became the very reason the knowledge vanished. The formula was reportedly confined to just 2 people, the reigning Byzantine emperor and one chosen member of a single family of chemists. Think about that level of control. The most powerful weapon in the known world was a secret shared by fewer people than you would need to fill a small room. These chosen chemists were not just employees, they were bound by the most severe oaths imaginable, sworn to silence on pain of death, or worse, being charged with treason against the empire itself. To even whisper a single ingredient was an act punishable by execution. But the Byzantines were masters of information control, and they understood that people are the weakest link in any security chain. So they engineered a brilliant and ultimately tragic system of compartmentalization. The entire process of creating and deploying Greek fire was broken down into isolated steps, with different groups of artisans knowing only their own small piece of the puzzle. One team, stationed far from the capital, might be responsible for collecting the crude naphtha from oil seeps near the Black Sea. They knew they were gathering a flammable liquid, but not its final use. Another group, perhaps in a hidden workshop, would be experts at refining the quicklime or distilling the pine resin. They understood their craft, but not how their product would be combined with others. The sailors who operated the siphons on the dromons were trained in the mechanics of the pump and the ignition, but they were deliberately kept ignorant of the liquid's exact composition. This meant that even if an enemy captured a Siphonarios, they could not torture the complete formula out of him because he simply did not possess it. This compartmentalization was a stroke of genius for security, but it was a fragile system that relied entirely on the stability of the Byzantine state. For centuries it worked, the empire remained strong, the imperial line was relatively stable, and the secret passed from one emperor to his heir, from one master chemist to his apprentice. But empires do not last forever. Over time, Constantinople was rocked by brutal palace coups, political assassinations, and violent changes in leadership. Imagine a scenario where an emperor who held the secret was overthrown and killed before he could pass it on to his successor, or consider the fate of that one family of chemists. What if they were caught in a city riot, or perished from a plague, or were executed on suspicion of disloyalty by a paranoid new ruler? As the empire itself began its long, slow decline, shrinking under constant pressure from new enemies, the intricate web of knowledge began to fray. The specialized workshops were abandoned, the trade routes for rare ingredients were cut off, and the institutional memory faded. The secret did not vanish in a single dramatic moment. It was more like a candle being slowly smothered. The precise recipe, the exact proportions, the secret step in the mixing process, all of it was gradually forgotten, lost to political upheaval and the relentless passage of time. The very measures that had protected the weapon for 500 years ensured that when the empire finally fell, the fire died with it. Even the eyewitnesses who saw Greek fire in action struggled to describe it in anything but terrifying poetry. We rely on chroniclers like Theophanes the Confessor, who recorded the great sieges of Constantinople. He wrote of the sea blazing with flame and ships consumed by a fire that water could not quench. Yet Theophanes was a monk, not a chemist. His account, and others like it, focus overwhelmingly on the weapon's horrific effects, the deafening roar, the blinding smoke, the way the flames seemed to crawl across the waves. They are describing a nightmare, not a recipe. These primary sources are invaluable for understanding the psychological impact, but they leave us grasping for hard technical facts. The Byzantines themselves were deliberately cryptic. In their own military manuals, they referred to it as sea fire or liquid fire, names that describe its behavior but reveal nothing of its substance. The famous term we use today, Greek fire, was actually a label applied by their terrified enemies in Western Europe. This linguistic divide creates immediate confusion in the historical record. When a medieval French chronicle speaks of Greek fire, is it describing the genuine Byzantine weapon, or is it using the term generically for any fearsome incendiary device? This problem of conflation runs deep. The Arabs, after their devastating defeats, eventually developed their own versions of liquid fire, and other cultures from China to the Vikings used various burning weapons in naval combat. Over centuries, all these different incendiaries, some based on petroleum, others on quicklime, some on saltpeter, began to be lumped together under the legendary name. The historical waters became hopelessly muddied, making it nearly impossible for modern researchers to separate the unique, state-secret Byzantine formula from the wider family of ancient flame weapons. How can you recreate something when you cannot even be sure which historical description points to the real thing? This leaves us with a profound puzzle, one where the written word fails and the only true answers lie in the realm of experimental archaeology. This ancient riddle eventually called out to modern science, challenging chemists and historians to become detectives. The first serious attempts to crack the code began in the early 20th century, with researchers proposing what seemed like a straightforward answer. The initial theory pointed to a simple blend of the most obvious ingredients, a basic cocktail of pitch, sulfur, and naphtha. Pitch is a thick, sticky tar. Sulfur makes any fire burn hotter and produce choking fumes, and naphtha is the highly flammable liquid base. Mixed together, these substances would certainly create a fearsome incendiary weapon, one that could be thrown in pots or launched from catapults. But could this simple mixture truly explain the legendary Greek fire? Would it be stable enough to be stored for long periods on a rolling warship, or be capable of being pumped through a complex bronze siphon without clogging? Most importantly, would it create that signature, terrifying effect of burning on water with such ferocity that it could not be put out? The answer upon testing was a resounding no. A simple pitch and naphtha blend would burn, but it would not reliably ignite upon hitting water, nor would it necessarily create that clinging, persistent fire that so horrified the empire's enemies. The early theory was a good starting point, but it was clearly missing a crucial reactive component. This is where a more sophisticated and compelling hypothesis entered the scene, the quicklime theory. We discussed this substance earlier, but its implications for a working weapon are profound. The idea is that the Byzantine chemists were not just mixing fuels, they were creating a chemical time bomb. The proposed mixture would combine naphtha with quicklime powder, which is chemically known as calcium oxide. On its own, this slurry could be stored in a sealed container, relatively safe from accidental ignition. The magic, or rather the chemistry, would happen the moment the mixture was projected onto the sea. Seawater would instantly react with the quicklime in an exothermic reaction, meaning it releases a tremendous burst of heat. This sudden thermal energy would be more than enough to instantly vaporize and ignite the naphtha, creating a fire that seemed to be born from the water itself. This theory elegantly explains the historical accounts of the fire igniting with a roar upon impact. It also provides a reason why water was useless against it, as any attempt to douse the flames would only introduce more water, triggering more quicklime and generating more heat to keep the inferno going. Driven by these theories, various researchers and institutions have actually fired up their labs to test these ancient recipes. The goal is not to create a weapon, but to solve a historical mystery through experimental archaeology. They have mixed their own batches, combining crude oil distillates with quicklime and other additives like sulfur and resin. In controlled environments, they have managed to create liquids that will indeed burn on the surface of water, producing impressive and intimidating plumes of fire. Yet every attempt seems to run into a new set of practical problems that the Byzantines apparently solved. Creating a stable mixture is one thing, but creating one that can be pressurized and pumped through a narrow tube is another entirely. The quicklime, being a solid powder, has a tendency to settle out of the liquid naphtha, clogging the siphon and making a consistent stream impossible. Some experimenters have tried creating a gel-like substance to hold the mixture in suspension, but then you face the challenge of getting that thicker fluid to project far enough to be a useful naval weapon. The real scientific challenge, then, is not just to make something that burns on water. It is to engineer a substance that is stable in storage, easily pumpable under pressure, instantly ignitable upon contact with seawater, and capable of clinging to surfaces while producing an unstoppable fire. Matching all these conditions described across centuries of historical accounts is the true holy grail of this quest. So if a stable, projectable formula has eluded our best modern efforts, how did the Byzantines manage it with 7th century technology? Perhaps their secret was not just in the ingredients, but in a forgotten step of the process, a piece of chemical wisdom that was lost when the last imperial chemist died without an heir. This base fuel was not a magical creation, but a resource harnessed directly from the earth. The Byzantine Empire was strategically positioned near some of the world's most significant natural oil seeps, particularly around the Black Sea region and in parts of the Middle East. In these areas, crude petroleum would slowly bubble up to the surface, creating tar pits and oily pools that were impossible to ignore. The Byzantines recognized the potential of this strange black liquid, but they understood that raw crude oil was not the ideal weapon. It is a thick, complex mixture of many different hydrocarbons, some heavy and tar-like, others light and volatile. To create the fierce, fast-burning fire they needed, they had to separate the best parts. This is where the concept of naphtha becomes critical. Naphtha is not a different substance, it is a refined product. It refers to the lighter, more flammable fractions of petroleum, the components that evaporate easily and ignite with terrifying speed. Think of it this way: crude oil is like a whole fruit with pulp, skin, and seeds. Naphtha is the pure, potent juice extracted from it. This refined liquid would have been thin, clear, or pale yellow, and incredibly volatile, perfect for being projected in a stream and bursting into a massive fireball. So how did they perform this chemical separation with 7th century technology? The answer likely lies in a simple but effective process known as distillation. Byzantine artisans probably heated the raw crude oil in large, sealed clay pots connected to a cooling tube. As the oil heated, the lighter naphtha vapors would rise first, travel through the tube, condense back into a liquid, and drip into a separate collection vessel. This allowed them to isolate a much more consistent and dangerously flammable product. This was not laboratory-grade purity, but it was a deliberate and clever refinement process. By mastering this basic distillation, they could ensure their weapon had a fuel base that was not only highly combustible, but also fluid enough to be pumped through those complex bronze siphons. The secret of Greek fire, therefore, began not in a secret laboratory, but in these open-air workshops where the very earth provided the first and most important ingredient. The engineering behind the siphon was as sophisticated as the fire it spat. This was not a simple tube, but a complex, pressurized projector, a true flamethrower born centuries before its time. Crafted from bronze for strength and heat resistance, the device was centered around a sealed reservoir holding the volatile liquid mixture. To force this fuel out with enough power to reach enemy ships, the Byzantines needed a reliable pump. Historians point to designs like the force pump invented by the ancient engineer Ctesibius, a device that used pistons and valves to create a continuous pressurized stream of water. Adapted for this terrifying new purpose, such a pump could have been operated by a crew of sailors, turning handles to build pressure within the reservoir. The liquid would then be forced through a narrow bronze tube mounted on the ship's prow, but the most critical moment came at the very end. The stream had to ignite the instant it left the nozzle, without flashing back into the tube and exploding the entire apparatus. The solution was likely a small, perpetual flame. A covered brazier of hot coals or a slow-burning, oil-soaked wick would have been positioned right at the siphon's mouth. As the pressurized liquid shot past this constant ignition source, it would instantly transform into a roaring jet of fire. The engineering challenges were immense. Preventing premature ignition inside the tube was a matter of life and death. The liquid had to be pumped with enough speed and consistency that the flame could not travel back up the stream, a phenomenon known as flashback. Any clogging from the solid ingredients in the mixture, like quicklime powder, would cause a catastrophic pressure buildup, and the operator, the siphonarios, stood mere feet from this infernal device, aiming a river of fire while his wooden ship rocked on the waves. His safety depended on flawless execution and the integrity of the bronze parts that held the chaos at bay. This intricate machine was a masterpiece of mechanical and chemical engineering, a secret so well kept that when the empire fell, the knowledge of how to build the siphon vanished as completely as the formula for the fire it carried. The most compelling clue to this ancient weapon lies not in a rare herb or a magical stone, but in a common mineral with a dangerous secret. Quicklime, known chemically as calcium oxide, is created by baking limestone in a hot kiln, a process well within the capabilities of Byzantine artisans. In its dry, powdered form, quicklime is relatively stable. A sealed barrel filled with a naphtha and quicklime slurry could be safely stored in the hold of a warship for months, posing no immediate threat. The moment that mixture met its target, however, everything changed. When quicklime contacts water, it does not simply get wet. It undergoes a violent exothermic reaction, a chemical process that releases a tremendous burst of heat almost instantly. This is not a gentle warming, but a surge of thermal energy intense enough to scorch skin and ignite tinder. Now, picture that reaction happening inside a fine mist of highly flammable naphtha spray the instant it hits the seawater. The quicklime's explosive heat would act as a built-in ignition system, flash vaporizing the petroleum and causing the entire stream to erupt into a fireball the moment it touched the waves. This single chemical principle elegantly solves the puzzle of Greek fire's most terrifying trait. The flames seemed to be born from the sea itself because, in a very real sense, they were. The water was not a foe to the fire, it was the final, essential ingredient, the trigger that set the entire inferno into motion. Any attempt to fight the blaze with buckets of seawater would be catastrophically counterproductive, each splash delivering more of the chemical trigger, generating more heat and feeding the flames further. This theory transforms the weapon from a simple incendiary into a brilliant piece of chemical engineering, a stable liquid that remained inert until the one element everyone thought would stop it made it infinitely more deadly. But the formula was likely a complex cocktail with other ingredients each playing a specialized role. To make the fire truly inescapable, the Byzantines needed it to cling. This is where pine resin or pitch would have been vital. These are thick, sticky saps harvested from trees, the same substances used to waterproof wooden ships. When added to the volatile naphtha base, the resin would transform the liquid from a flowing fuel into a gooey, adhesive nightmare. Imagine a burning, tar-like substance that splattered across a sail or a wooden hull and simply stuck there, impossible to scrape off as it seared through the material. It would have clung to the skin and clothing of sailors, creating horrific, unquenchable personal fires. This sticky quality turned the weapon from an area effect blaze into a targeted, persistent torment. Then there was sulfur, a yellow mineral known for its flammable and foul properties. Sulfur's primary role was to make the fire burn hotter and more fiercely, but its secondary effect was a form of ancient chemical warfare. When sulfur burns, it produces sulfur dioxide, a dense, toxic gas that chokes the lungs and stings the eyes. On the crowded, smoky deck of a wooden warship, a cloud of this gas would have been debilitating, causing panic and incapacitating enemy crews even before the flames reached them. The most debated ingredient, however, is saltpeter, which is potassium nitrate. This white crystalline substance is the key oxidizing agent in gunpowder. If the Byzantine chemists had discovered and incorporated saltpeter into their mixture, it would have fundamentally changed the weapon's character. The saltpeter would provide its own oxygen, allowing the fire to burn even in the absence of air, making it utterly impossible to smother. It could have also given the jet a more explosive, projectile-like quality. So why do most historians doubt its inclusion? The argument is one of historical consequence. If the Byzantines had been using saltpeter for 5 centuries, this knowledge would have almost certainly spread. The basic recipe for gunpowder, a simple blend of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, would have been stumbled upon much earlier in Europe. The fact that gunpowder did not appear in the West until centuries later, introduced from Chinese sources, strongly suggests that the legendary Greek fire was a different, albeit equally terrifying, technological branch. Its power came not from the explosive chemistry of gunpowder, but from a perfected blend of petroleum, reactive quicklime, and these horrifying additives that turned the sea into a sticky, toxic, and unquenchable hellscape. For centuries after its disappearance, the ghost of Greek fire haunted the minds of warriors and inventors. European crusaders marching to the Holy Land faced Byzantine ships and witnessed the weapon's horrific power firsthand. They returned home with tales of a fire that could not be put out, sparking a desperate race to recreate it. Their own attempts, however, were clumsy imitations. They mixed pitch, oil, and sulfur to create basic incendiary pots that could be catapulted onto enemy ships. These mixtures burned, but they lacked the defining characteristics of the original. They did not project in a continuous stream, they did not reliably ignite on water, and most importantly, they could be doused. The true secret had not been stolen, only its terrifying shadow. This quest then fell to the alchemists of the Middle Ages and Renaissance. These early chemists working in smoky laboratories saw the lost formula as the ultimate prize. They searched for the philosopher's stone, but they also sought the secret of liquid fire. Their experiments involved endless combinations of every flammable substance they could find, from animal fats and resins to distilled alcohols and mysterious powders. Their manuscripts are filled with cryptic recipes for fierce burning oils, but none captured the unique, water-triggered reaction that defined the Byzantine weapon. They were working in the dark, guided more by legend than by a true understanding of petroleum chemistry. A more scientific approach emerged in the 19th and early 20th centuries. With the dawn of the modern petroleum industry, chemists finally had a deep understanding of naphtha, kerosene, and other refined fuels. They could systematically test the quicklime theory and other hypotheses with precise measurements. Historical societies and even military organizations funded experiments, hoping to unlock an ancient advantage. Yet these modern attempts, while producing impressive flames, consistently ran into the same practical problems that likely plagued early imitators. Their mixtures were unstable, their projections were weak, and their concoctions failed to replicate the reported combination of stability, pumpability, and instant aquatic ignition. This long and frustrating history, stretching from the Crusades to the modern lab, proves one thing: the puzzle of Greek fire is not a new challenge for science. It is a mystery that has captivated and confounded the best minds for nearly as long as the secret has been lost. One of the most famous modern attempts to solve this ancient puzzle unfolded not in a secret lab but for a television audience. In the 1990s, the PBS series Nova brought together a team of experts, including historian John Haldon and chemist John Deacon, to attempt a full-scale reconstruction. Their goal was to test the quicklime hypothesis in the most dramatic way possible, by building a working replica of the Byzantine siphon and firing it. They devised a formula using ingredients the Byzantines would have recognized: a base of crude oil mixed with pine resin to create a sticky, viscous liquid. Into this flammable gel, they stirred the key ingredient, powdered quicklime. The theory was sound, the mixture looked the part, and their reconstructed bronze pump and siphon appeared historically accurate. The stage was set for a modern weapon to meet an ancient legend. The moment of truth arrived on a body of water, with their siphon aimed at a target floating in a pool. When they pumped the handle and the mixture shot from the nozzle, the result was both spectacular and deeply revealing. A jet of liquid shot out, and upon hitting the water, it did indeed ignite into a massive fireball. Flames raced across the surface, creating that iconic sheet of fire that had haunted historical accounts. For a few breathtaking seconds, it seemed they had succeeded. Yet the problems began almost immediately. The thick, sticky mixture designed to cling to ships also clung to the inside of their pump, requiring immense physical effort to maintain pressure. The solid quicklime particles constantly threatened to settle out or clog the narrow bronze tube, jeopardizing the entire apparatus. Most tellingly, their fire, while impressive, did not ignite with the instantaneous, roaring fury described by Byzantine enemies. It was a powerful incendiary, but it lacked that seemingly magical property of appearing to be lit by the water itself. The team's conclusion was a sobering lesson in the gap between theory and practice. They had proven that a substance could be made to burn on water using these components, but the practical challenges of creating a stable, pumpable, and reliably self-igniting mixture were immense. Their experiment highlighted a crucial truth: the real secret of Greek fire may not have been a single magical ingredient, but a refined and perfected process, a level of chemical and engineering finesse that was lost when the last imperial chemist took his secrets to the grave. Even with all our modern tools, rebuilding Greek fire remains a stubborn historical puzzle. The first and most obvious obstacle is the total absence of a precise recipe. We have dramatic accounts of its effects, but no Byzantine cookbook listing ingredients and their exact proportions. Scientists are forced to work backwards from poetry and enemy reports, trying to reverse engineer a complex chemical weapon from descriptions of its terrifying symptoms. It is like trying to bake a perfect cake by only knowing it was deliciously moist and had a crispy top. You can guess the ingredients, but without the exact measurements and mixing order, your results will never be quite right. The second challenge lies in the raw materials themselves. The ancient Byzantines sourced their crude oil from specific natural seeps in the Black Sea region. This petroleum, formed over millions of years from unique biological and geological conditions, had a distinct chemical fingerprint. Its exact balance of light naphthas and heavier tars would have been crucial to the formula's behavior. Modern refined petroleum is a different substance altogether, processed for consistency in fuels and plastics, stripped of the idiosyncratic impurities that might have been the secret ingredient. Using it is like trying to replicate a fine, aged wine with pure grain alcohol. The basic element is there, but the subtle character that made it work is completely lost. Then there is the problem of the machine itself. We have general descriptions of the bronze siphon, but the precise metallurgy and craftsmanship are a mystery. The exact alloy, the thickness of the tube, the design of the pumps, valves, and seals, even the shape of the nozzle, all of these engineering choices would have been refined over generations to handle the abrasive, volatile mixture. A slight miscalculation in the bore of the tube or the strength of a piston could lead to a catastrophic clog or a fatal explosion right on the ship's deck. Recreating the siphon is not just about building a tube and a pump. It is about rediscovering a lost art of mechanical engineering perfected for one singular, deadly purpose. All of these historical and technical challenges are compounded by a very modern dilemma: safety and ethics. How do you responsibly test a substance designed to be an unstoppable, water-ignited incendiary? Projecting a highly volatile, sticky gel that clings and burns on everything it touches is incredibly dangerous, a serious risk to both researchers and the environment. Furthermore, there is a profound ethical question about devoting significant resources to recreating a weapon of mass destruction, even for purely historical or academic reasons. The goal is to solve a mystery, not to provide a blueprint for a horrific new form of warfare. This final barrier may be the most insurmountable, ensuring that the full, terrifying power of Greek fire remains, perhaps rightly, locked in the past. That question forces us to confront a darker dimension of this ancient superweapon. Its horror was not merely in the flames, but in the choking, toxic cloud that accompanied them. When Greek fire burned, the sulfur in its mixture would have produced sulfur dioxide, a dense, poisonous gas that seared the lungs and blinded the eyes. On the deck of a wooden warship trapped by wind and waves, enemy sailors faced a brutal choice: burn alive or suffocate in the acidic fumes. This moves the weapon beyond simple incendiary terror into a different category altogether. Was this the first chemical weapon? By a modern definition, which includes any weapon that uses toxic chemicals to injure or kill, the argument is compelling. The Byzantines were not just burning ships, they were poisoning the very air that sailors breathed. This was not an isolated tactic in the ancient world. Centuries earlier, the Spartans used burning sulfur and arsenic to create toxic smoke during their sieges, hoping to force defenders from their walls. The Romans deployed similar choking fumes. Greek fire, however, systematized this form of warfare, turning a toxic byproduct into a core, intentional feature of its naval deployment. Its psychological impact was arguably as powerful as its physical devastation. The sight of a fire that water fed, combined with an invisible, choking agent that incapacitated crews before the flames even reached them, created an aura of supernatural dread. For the Byzantine soldiers, it was a shield of divine favor. For their enemies, it was a manifestation of hell itself, a weapon that broke not just their ships but their will to fight. This dual assault, physical and psychological, is what truly changed the nature of warfare. It demonstrated that the most powerful weapons are those that conquer the mind as much as they destroy the body. This terrifying weapon was not entirely without parallel in the ancient world. Across the globe, other cultures were also mastering the destructive power of fire. In China, as early as the 9th century, military manuals describe a weapon known as fierce fire oil. This substance, likely a distilled petroleum product, was said to be ignited before being launched from trebuchets or pumped through flamethrowers. It burned so fiercely that water only intensified its flames, a description that sounds hauntingly familiar. Yet while the base ingredient was similar, the Chinese formulas often incorporated different additives like tung oil or arsenic sulfide, creating a distinct chemical profile from the Byzantine secret. The concept of unquenchable fire even captured the modern imagination, most famously in the fictional wildfire from Game of Thrones. This fantasy substance, a green liquid that clings and burns with explosive fury, is a direct literary homage to the legends of Greek fire, showing how its mythic power has endured for centuries. The Byzantines themselves adapted their star weapon for land battles. They crafted ceramic grenades filled with the liquid mixture, which soldiers could throw by hand or launch from catapults to drench enemy siege towers and battering rams in sticky flames. Later, in the medieval Middle East, armies developed their own hand-thrown incendiary pots, often called naphtha, which were jars filled with a simpler blend of naphtha and other combustibles. So why did Greek fire remain so dominant when so many others had similar ideas? The answer lies in the perfection of the entire system. While others had the basic fuel, the Byzantines possessed a complete, integrated technology. They had the secret formula refined for stability and reactivity, the specialized bronze siphons that could project it as a continuous stream, and the disciplined naval tactics to deploy it with devastating effect. It was not merely a better recipe, it was a superior weapons platform. The existence of these global cousins only deepens the mystery, proving that the core idea was attainable, but the Byzantine execution was a masterpiece of ancient science that no one else could quite match. The very empire that created this liquid guardian could no longer sustain its life. As Byzantine power slowly crumbled over the centuries, the intricate system supporting Greek fire began to fray and finally snap. The specialized workshops where artisans refined naphtha and processed quicklime were abandoned as territories were lost. The secure trade routes for rare ingredients were severed. Most critically, the fragile chain of oral tradition, passing the formula from one emperor and one chemist to their chosen successors, was broken by the chaos of palace coups, foreign invasions, and political murder. The knowledge did not leak out, it simply evaporated from a civilization that was no longer stable enough to hold it. Yet the final blow came not from within, but from a technological revolution arriving from the east. Gunpowder, a Chinese invention that traveled west along the Silk Road, began to change the very nature of warfare. Early gunpowder weapons were unpredictable and prone to misfiring, but they offered a tactical advantage Greek fire could never match: sheer distance. A Byzantine dromon had to sail perilously close to an enemy vessel to unleash its fiery jet, putting itself within range of arrows, grappling hooks, and ramming attacks. The Siphonarios was a hero, but he was also a vulnerable target. Now, imagine the first time a European or Ottoman warship mounted an early cannon. It could lob a solid stone or iron ball and smash a hole in an enemy hull from hundreds of yards away. There was no need to close the distance, no need to risk your own ship being engulfed in the same conflagration you were trying to create. the tactical paradigm had shifted irrevocably. Why risk a chaotic, close-range inferno when you could sink your enemy from a safe, standoff position? Cannonballs did not just damage ships, they shattered the entire logic of naval combat that Greek fire had dominated for 500 years. The age of the boarding action and the intimate firefight was giving way to the age of artillery. Greek fire, a weapon of terrifying psychological and area denial, was utterly outclassed by a technology that prioritized raw, destructive power delivered from afar. Its disappearance was therefore a two-fold tragedy, a loss born from internal decay and external obsolescence. The secret was forgotten because the world that needed it and the empire that protected it had both vanished, replaced by a new era where fire gave way to the thunder of the gun. The seafloor holds its secrets tightly, especially from fire. For all the terror Greek fire inspired on the surface, it has left almost no physical trace in the depths. The grim reality of maritime archaeology is that the ocean is a voracious consumer of history. A wooden warship, once consumed by this legendary inferno, would burn to the waterline and sink. On the seafloor, its timbers are devoured by worms and bacteria, while any iron fittings dissolve into rust. The liquid fire itself, a volatile cocktail of chemicals, would dissipate completely, leaving no recognizable residue after centuries beneath the waves. This is the core of the problem. We are searching for the ghost of a weapon that was designed to leave no evidence behind. No archaeologist has ever pulled a jar from a wreck and definitively labeled it Greek fire. The most promising finds are always ambiguous. On several ancient shipwrecks, archaeologists have discovered amphorae, the classic clay jars, containing traces of petroleum or thick, tar-like pitch. These finds confirm that flammable liquids were standard cargo, used for lanterns, waterproofing, or simpler incendiary weapons. But was this the state secret that saved an empire? It is like finding a modern gas can and declaring you have discovered the formula for napalm. The ingredients might be similar, but the sophisticated, weaponized recipe remains elusive. The search then turns to the delivery system itself. Could we find the legendary bronze siphon? A few metal tubes and strange pump mechanisms have been recovered from Byzantine-era wrecks, but attributing them directly to Greek fire is nearly impossible. A bronze tube could be part of a bilge pump, a distillation apparatus, or any number of shipboard devices. Without the unique context of being found mounted on a dromond's prow, surrounded by the chemical signature of its fuel, these artifacts remain intriguing maybes. This evidentiary void forces us to rely on a different kind of digging, not in the silt of the ocean floor, but in the fragile pages of ancient manuscripts. The true battlefield for understanding Greek fire has shifted from the sea to the library, where every faded word is a clue in a mystery that the water has tried its best to erase. This lost technology has burned its way straight into our collective dreams. Long after the last Byzantine siphon fell silent, Greek fire found a new life in the glowing screens of cinemas and the pages of fantasy novels. Here, it is rarely a messy, chemical weapon, but a magical, otherworldly force. It is almost always depicted as a vibrant, emerald green flame, a color far more dramatic than the smoky orange and yellow of a real petroleum fire. This fictional version is not just potent, it is often apocalyptic, a substance of last resort that threatens to consume everything. The most famous modern echo is wildfire from Game of Thrones, a green liquid that burns with such ferocious intensity that it can destroy entire fleets and stone castles alike. Its depiction is a direct homage to the legends of Greek fire, capturing that core idea of an uncontrollable fire that water cannot quench, but the influence spreads even further. Countless video games feature alchemical weapons that are clearly inspired by this ancient terror, from flaming potions in fantasy role-playing games to specialized grenades in historical action titles. Even science fiction has its version, often replacing the mystical green flame with a corrosive green goo that clings and dissolves everything it touches. This cultural transformation is fascinating. A complex piece of ancient engineering has been simplified into a single, powerful symbol. The challenging realities of pressurized pumps and quicklime chemistry are stripped away, leaving only the core myth, the idea of a lost superweapon of unimaginable power. This legacy proves that the true impact of Greek fire extends far beyond the battlefield. When a technology vanishes so completely, it leaves a vacuum that imagination rushes to fill. It becomes more than a historical fact. It becomes a timeless story about the allure and the danger of ultimate power, a permanent fixture in humanity's library of legends. This pursuit leads us to a profound and unsettling question. Should we even try to bring this weapon back from the past? On one hand, the drive to recover lost knowledge is a powerful human impulse. Recreating Greek fire would be the ultimate triumph of experimental archaeology, a chance to prove we can solve a mystery that has baffled historians for 1,000 years. The scientific and historical value is immense. It would give us a clearer window into the technological prowess of the Byzantine Empire, revealing the sophisticated chemistry and engineering they mastered. For academics, it represents the ultimate puzzle, a challenge that combines material science, history, and mechanical engineering into one fascinating project. Solving it would be a monumental achievement, a testament to our own ability to decipher the secrets of the ancient world. Yet this intellectual pursuit clashes with a heavy moral weight. Greek fire was not a tool for healing or building. It was a weapon of mass destruction designed for a single, brutal purpose: to inflict horrific suffering and death. Its entire existence was meant to burn human beings and sink their ships. Is there a moral imperative to leave some secrets buried, especially those born purely from warfare? The potential for misuse is a terrifying prospect. Even if recreated in a controlled lab for study, the knowledge of how to make a stable, water-igniting incendiary could never be fully contained. That blueprint could fall into the wrong hands, providing a template for a devastating modern weapon. The arguments for and against are a fundamental conflict between the thirst for knowledge and the responsibility that comes with it. Do we have the right to unlock a box that was so deliberately sealed by history, a box containing nothing but fire and agony? The answer is not a simple one, and it forces us to consider where the line is between understanding our past and glorifying its most terrible inventions. The search for Greek fire has now entered the digital realm, where the answers may lie not in a clay pot but in a stream of binary code. Advanced analytical techniques offer a new way to interrogate the past. Gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, is a powerful tool that acts like a hypersensitive chemical detective. If archaeologists were to find an amphora from a Byzantine warship with even a microscopic residue inside, this technology could vaporize that tiny sample and separate its chemical components, identifying each one with precision. It would be searching for the unique fingerprint of the original mixture, a ghostly chemical signature that could confirm the presence of distilled naphtha, pine resin, and perhaps even the telltale markers of quicklime reaction products. This would move the investigation from guesswork to forensic science, providing the first concrete evidence of what the Byzantines actually used. Alongside this physical analysis, a new kind of digital alchemy is taking shape. Computational chemists can now build virtual models of potential formulas on supercomputers. They can simulate thousands of different ingredient combinations, adjusting the ratios of naphtha, quicklime, sulfur, and resin in a vast digital laboratory. These simulations do not just mix ingredients, they model the complex chemical reactions that occur when the virtual mixture hits seawater. The computer can calculate the heat released, the speed of ignition, the viscosity of the liquid, and even how it would spread and cling to a wooden surface. This process allows researchers to test countless hypothetical recipes against the historical descriptions, seeking the one digital concoction that behaves exactly like the legendary fire, burning on water and resisting extinction. This represents the ultimate fusion of history and technology, a quest that has evolved from mixing vats in a lab to running complex algorithms that can explore possibilities far beyond the reach of any physical experiment. The secret that was once locked in a single human mind may now be hiding in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered by the relentless logic of a machine. So where does this leave our quest for the lost fire? After sifting through centuries of historical accounts, testing chemical theories, and grappling with lost engineering, we must confront a difficult truth. A perfect, definitive recreation of the original Byzantine weapon is likely beyond our reach. We can absolutely create mixtures that burn on water, and we can build devices that project flame. We have proven the chemistry of the quicklime reaction and the tactical power of a sticky, unquenchable fuel. These modern reconstructions are impressive, but they remain echoes, not the original voice. The true secret of Greek fire was not a single ingredient, but a perfect symphony of elements that we can no longer fully replicate. It began with the fuel itself, a specific crude oil from ancient seeps around the Black Sea, a natural resource with a unique chemical fingerprint that has long since been depleted or altered. The exact process for refining that oil into the perfect naphtha base is lost to us, a hands-on art passed from master to apprentice. The precise ratios of quicklime, sulfur, and resin, and the crucial order of mixing them formed a recipe that was never written down. And the bronze siphon was not a simple tube, but a precision instrument, its metallurgy and mechanics refined over generations to handle a volatile, abrasive slurry without exploding. Each of these components is a puzzle piece, and we are missing too many to complete the picture. We can assemble a version that looks similar from a distance, but the intricate, interlocking fit of the original is gone. The secret did not vanish in a single moment, but was eroded by the slow decay of an empire, the obsolescence of its technology, and the final, irrevocable silence of its last master craftsman. We are left standing at the edge of history, close enough to feel the heat of the legend, but forever separated from its true flame. The story of Greek fire is a profound reminder that knowledge, no matter how powerful, can be terrifyingly fragile. For 5 centuries, this single invention was the burning shield of an empire, a technological marvel born from chemistry and engineering genius. Yet its survival depended not just on the brilliance of its creation, but on a ruthless system of secrecy that ultimately became its tomb. When the empire that nurtured it fell, the intricate web of artisans, chemists, and engineers unraveled, and the secret was extinguished forever. This is not merely a story about a lost weapon. It is a cautionary tale about the ephemeral nature of human achievement. Our relentless quest to rebuild it has taught us more than we ever expected. It has revealed the sophisticated scientific minds of the ancient world, forcing us to reconsider the Byzantines not as relics of a fallen Rome, but as master chemists who weaponized the elements. We have traced the evolution of warfare, watching as the intimate terror of fire gave way to the distant thunder of gunpowder artillery. And we have grappled with the immense power a secret can hold, a power so great that an entire civilization was willing to let it die rather than let it fall into enemy hands. So we are left with a final, haunting question. Do we continue this search, pouring our modern technology into solving this ancient riddle, driven by an insatiable curiosity to finally know what they knew? Or is this one secret best left in the past, a ghost we should not chase, a power we are wiser not to possess? The answer tells us as much about ourselves as it does about the long-vanished chemists of Constantinople. Let us know what you think in the comments and subscribe for more journeys into history's greatest mysteries.